Hey guys, welcome back to Room to Feel. I'm Ryan White. If this is your first time here, I want to let you know that we call our listeners roomies. And if you've been here before, welcome back, roomie. Let's make room to feel. We have today a very, very special guest. We're with Dr. Tyler Jean. You've played a major, major role in my healing journey. And honestly, you're one of the reasons that I've actually launched this entire podcast. About a year ago, I was at, I'd say, probably one of the lowest points in my life. I had been diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome, which is also known as MCAS. I was having severe food reactions, and I'd lost about a little over 25 pounds. I was 6 feet tall, just so everyone knows. Well, I am 6 feet tall. That didn't change. But I was 165 typically, which is thin, you know, for someone who's 6 feet tall, but healthy. And I got down to a little under 140 pounds, which was terrifying. Like, I didn't know what was going on with my body. Nothing was making sense. I was having the most insane pains throughout my body, lots of rashes. Just, my body was kind of flipped upside down on itself. And, you know, I'd gone to a million doctors, neurologist, autoimmune specialist, my general practitioner. And I'd say not many of them really knew what to do with me. Some helped, most of them didn't. But I think I finally got to a point where I said I had to make a change because my primary doctor essentially fired me and said, like, we can't do anything else with you. We've done everything under the sun. We think this is mainly in your head. And again, kind of left me in the dry, like left me in the dust. And that's where you came into my world. So Dr. Tyler, thank you so much for being here with me today and joining us. I know you came all the way from New York City.
Yeah. Thank you for having me today, Ryan. I'm excited to talk with you and just want to honor you and the journey you've been through and sharing your story. I'm excited to talk more about that. And I know we're going to dive into all things mast cell, but
yeah,
you know, it's something that I hear a lot, and I'm so sorry that was your experience. Most people, you know, they have these constellation of symptoms and it's like, what is going on in my body? Something doesn't feel right. Maybe I've gone in and I've done all the lab work and everything looks normal, only to be dismissed by your provider that, yeah, this is just all in your head. And I think for a lot of people that I speak to, the most confronting, the scariest thing that a lot of people experience is like, well, if these providers don't know what's going on, like you start to kind of go in this spiral of like, well, what's wrong with me?
Yes.
How bad is this?
Yep.
And then it can get to this really dark place too of like, is there a way out of this? Will there be better days?
Yeah.
How do I navigate this? And so, you know, it's interesting how I never personally had mast cell activation syndrome, but mast cell and histamine issues have kind of found me in the functional medicine world.
Got it.
And I think a lot of that is because when it comes to mast cell, it is a multi-pronged approach on how the body is responding to our internal environment, also our external environment.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is being communicated at the level of our nervous system.
Sure.
And our nervous system's primary job is to keep us safe, to survive. And whenever threat comes up in our nervous system, and we perceive that we're not safe, this can start to sound the alarms, and this can cause a whole bunch of different symptoms that come up, especially chronically too.
Yes.
And so with this, it's this bridge of looking at safety in the nervous system with very real symptomatic issues, whether that is related to skin or to gut or to your respiratory system, your GI tract, you name it. And so being able to blend that, I guess, that bridge from conventional medicine, and there's very real symptoms that people are experiencing, to more of the somatic, spiritual integration of all this to really find a path to healing that is sustainable and not just simply patching symptoms, which I'm sure at times when you're early on in your journey, you know, you were using certain over-the-counter medications and prescription medications to manage symptoms.
I was doing everything. I was seeing fucking psychics. I was going to every acupuncturist. I was doing all the pills, all the supplements. I was overdoing it, you know, because I felt like nothing is working. So I must try everything, which I was becoming more like hypervigilant, I guess, around my health. Okay, we're going to get into all of those things. But before we do that, I kind of want to just take a step back and really introduce you as a doctor. So can you walk me through just who you are, what you're a naturopathic doctor, right?
Yeah.
So maybe explain what that means. What's the difference between that and an MD? And just kind of give the audience a little bit more perspective of kind of who you are as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Ryan said, I'm a naturopathic doctor. So naturopathic doctors go through a 4-year accredited medical training, just like your typical MD or DO will go to their own 4-year medical school. So
Okay.
postgraduate, you'll go to school. 4 years of training. Very much those first 2 years are very much rooted in the sciences and biochemistry and physiology, immunology, all that good stuff, and
All that smart people
all the
stuff.
smart
Yeah.
people stuff that anyone going into some type of medical training would do.
Okay.
And then in addition to, the basics of things, then you go into the clinical care. And oftentimes the big difference I would say between a naturopathic doctor and a medical doctor, a DO, more of your typical physician,
Yeah.
is one, we are really working with the body and its capacity to heal versus working against the body. And what I mean by that is usually in the what I call the allopathic paradigm, that's your typical Western medicine model, there's this pill for every ill approach. We look at symptoms as the problem,
Yes.
and the way that we treat and heal individuals is we manage or suppress the symptoms.
Sure.
And usually that is through pharmaceutical interventions. There's also surgery. We can just cut it out as well. And if the pathology has progressed really far.
Yep.
But in conventional medicine, very much kind of limited to the pharmaceutical model and surgery with some evidence-based perspectives on like diet, lifestyle interventions.
Okay.
But that's not really the core of it. I would say the big model, if you look at like at large, people that are medical doctors, doctor of osteopathic medicine, that system, that institution is really designed on one, how to identify pathology and then to treat it.
Sure.
Versus naturopathic medicine, we're really looking at how do we cultivate health to prevent disease.
Got it.
So
Like
it's
the
really-
root cause of what's really going on versus slapping a Band-Aid on something.
Absolutely. So
i.e.
we're asking that
medication.
deeper question as to why.
Got it.
Why is the mast cell coming up? Because it's not just, if I have to take this medication every day and if I don't take it, the symptoms come back, well then
Yeah.
what are we missing?
Yeah. What is the reason that you have a mast cell, or what is the reason that you might have an autoimmune disorder or something like
Yeah.
that? So you get more to the root cause of that.
It's very integrative too.
Yeah.
So like, in addition to like, we also are trained in pharmacology, have prescribing rights depending on what state you're in.
Okay.
We also are trained in clinical nutrition, homeopathy, supplements, peptides, hydrotherapy, physical medicine, mind-body interventions. So herbalism, we have such a large toolkit.
Yeah.
And I always say it's like build your toolkit and then pull from it depending on where you're at in your healing journey and what's going to be best supportive.
I mean, I'm like, as you're saying all this, it's just like so shocking to me because it's so different than a typical doctor. Not to say that an MD, there's not something necessary for that at times, but the way you just explained everything and the way that it resonates, at least with me, and I would imagine a lot of people out there who've had certain illnesses and felt like they were getting no answers, it just seems like very logical. Like you want to
Right.
figure out what is going on, like why is this happening to me? Not just, how come this is happening and how do we just like, again, like kind of like take the easy road out. I think we also really want to know as people, like, why is my body being affected in this way? Or why did something just come up out of what seems out of the blue? It really never is. It seems like, there's always things that kind of build up to that, I guess. But
Absolutely.
it's just pretty
And
incredible.
Here's the harsh reality too, is we have a medical system that is incentivized more and profits more off of when we are sick versus
Sure.
when we are healthy.
Sure.
And to be healthy, especially in this country, this day and age, is incredibly challenging. And so because of this, healing and a lot of that also being lifestyle driven is not a quick fix silver bullet solution. And not everybody wants to truly heal. And that is just the hard reality and truth. And for some people, depending on what they have access to in terms of medical providers,
Yeah.
Insurance coverage, depending on what's going on, the best and easiest solution oftentimes is a pill. And so I don't
Yes.
want to
Yes.
dismiss the benefits of Western medicine, but really I take a more integrative approach where it's like there's room for all forms of medicine.
Yes.
And it's like pull from that to create your own practitioner team, whether it's your psychic, your acupuncturist, your therapist, your medical doctor, your naturopath, your chiropractor, you name it. It's like building, because we all have our own strengths and limitations.
Yes.
And then, I think just being mindful of that. If you want to truly heal, like if you're going to your doctor, most of them, they're not really trained on how to make you healthy.
Yeah.
They're trained on how to manage
The
symptoms,
symptom. Yes.
which is how we treat disease,
Yes.
versus getting more to that root cause. Now, I do want to create like a little clarification is there is a field of called functional medicine. Have you heard of that before?
Yes. Yes.
So a lot of people always ask like, what is functional medicine? How does that compare to a naturopathic doctor? You know, I have to say like naturopathic doctors have been around for over a century, and naturopaths and natural hygienists and chiropractors and herbalists. And it was back during the Flexner Report when it was kind of like the dawn back in the early 1900s, that a lot of these healers really kind of got sidelined and kind of ostracized with the dawn of medical institutions. And back then, like the leading cause of death were a lot of things that were infectious in origin. And this is where penicillin was a big breakthrough in antibiotics. And so we created a whole system though, where it was like, okay, there's this pill for every ill. We're going to take those collection of symptoms. We give it a disease name. And that is kind of the model. And it's very much kind of just like an algorithm of treatment, but largely is, again, ignoring or not working with the body's capacity to heal.
Yes.
Like, how do we support that? And so there's been this resurgence, I would say, in the last 10 or 15 years where people are starting to be more curious and like, what can I do about my health instead of just like watching and waiting until something happens? Maybe you know you have a genetic predisposition. It's like, well, what can I do now that can help to make me more robust to maybe some of these things that the genetic lottery, I'm more prone to.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people are waking up, especially since COVID. It's like, how can I take the power back into my hands and really think about how my actions and my day-to-day routines and my lifestyle are ultimately impacting my health?
And so a functional medicine doctor, are they kind of doing both of what a MD and a naturopath doctor is doing, or is that what it is?
So I often say like naturopaths were like the OG functional medicine, but it's just gotten a new name. It is a certification program that any licensed provider can apply for.
Got it.
And I believe it's like an 18-month program. There's different tracks.
Okay.
And so basically it's postgraduate additional training. So a DO, a chiropractor, a nutritionist, a yoga therapist, a nurse practitioner can get the certification. A naturopathic doctor can get the certification just to get the distinction that they are an Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner.
Got it. Okay.
And really, what is it doing? It's just giving them more language and vocabulary on how to work with the body, whether through nutrition, detoxification, mind-body interventions, and diet and lifestyle interventions.
Okay. So I want you to share a little bit, I guess, about your whole journey as well. Because I know on your social media platforms or even the conversations you and I have had together, you've been really open about your kind of struggles, whether it be through anxiety or ADHD or perfectionism, or even I think you have asthma and certain things that were affecting you on a health front. So do you mind kind of sharing a little bit about kind of what you've come through and maybe I guess some of the things that you believe brought up those kind of symptoms more from a mental state or physical state?
Yeah. I mean, I think all healers, people that get into medicine, often the story is, well, one, a desire to help, but they also had their own health challenges growing up.
Yes.
And, I think one of those defining moments for me was when I was 14 and I went into a doctor's office. I did a psychoeducational evaluation and I left that day with a diagnosis of ADHD. And I remember that day very clearly. That doctor mentioned, this is something you're just gonna have to deal with for the rest of your life. And I think, a lot of the options to me too, in terms of prescription medications, were stimulants as the option. And I also in school was, I was enrolled in the disabled students program.
Hey, I was in that too.
You were too?
Yeah, I would call it the dumb kids classes, which is terrible to say, but like, because I had learning disabilities and dyslexia and things like that, they just threw you in a classroom with a bunch of other kids who had learning disabilities. And so, okay, I can relate to that.
And so like the diagnosis of a learning disability and this thought that like I was broken, like there's something wrong with me. I don't know if you relate to that. And that was
yes.
really kind of, I think, like the fuel to me. And like I already had a fascination with the human body, and I was a competitive swimmer for 15 years. So there was very much this interest in performance and how to optimize the body for, being able to swim faster and recover and things of that nature. And so I kind of took it upon myself of like, I'm going to find a way. I'm going to kind of like, the biggest kind of clap back to this doctor was like, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to do this, where I'm not kind of beholden to this label of a learning disability and like this aspect that I'm broken. And so it pushed me to such great lengths, and perfectionism was a part of this too, to like, you know, prove to myself, to prove to others that, you know, I wasn't broken, that I was capable. And I mean, that very much led me into medicine. It would definitely kind of pattern a lot of these high achieving tendencies and the need to, this drive to succeed in order to kind of prove my worth. And, you know, the nervous system, when it is kind of mobilized around, again, this need to prove and kind of always under pressure and performance, like our body can do that for short stints.
Sure.
But when it's in this kind of chronic pressure cooker that's just constantly building over time, it can lead to different symptoms. And I'm very much of the belief, like, symptoms are messengers, don't shoot the messengers, right? Symptoms are not the problems, they're actually the invitation to go deeper. And anxiety was just another branch of that. I dealt with generalized anxiety disorder for 20 years. And I went to naturopathic medical school in particular to really understand the root cause of anxiety. And I did all the things from, you know, weaning off and cutting out alcohol and changing my diet and taking supplements and herbs and neurofeedback and cognitive behavioral therapy and homeopathy. I did all these different things.
I've done all those fucking things too.
Right? And they did help.
They do, but yeah, it's exhausting just hearing you say that.
So much.
Because it's a lot to do. But,
you're all consumed and focused just on like constantly healing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this rat race, and you're always looking, you're always seeking. And part of it is because you're like, something is not right, something is off. We're searching for something in the future where maybe we feel more whole, less anxious, more present, less or more calm, more safe, right? And so for me, like my anxiety at large, like all these tools help. Beth said it's like a dial. So like, of course, like you can change your diet, prioritize sleep, cut out, you know, supplements. Maybe the anxiety, if it's like 100 out of 100, you're like really feeling it, it's turning it down every single, with each intervention. Now it's only 80%, 70, 60, 50, 40. So it makes it more manageable.
Yes.
But when we truly get to the root causes we talk about, usually there's no needing to prop up those symptoms and management, even with supplements. And so I think the first big breakthrough for me, it's like I finished school, I climbed the top of this mountain, and it's like this milestone that little Tyler always wanted to achieve. And like he had done it in terms of you know, the recognition, the credentialing, the status of building this very successful social media personal brand, and just all this autonomy, all this monetary success. And I still felt disconnected. I still felt like I was missing something. I think part of me, the drive too, was to prove to myself that I wasn't broken, but there was also this underlying desire to prove that I was worthy of love.
Yes.
And I thought of that through success, and love also being something that was something tangible. You're either in love or you're not, in the form of partnership. And so I think when I got to the top of that mountain and I still felt alone, it took me on this very different path, this spiritual journey. And part of that was really starting to dabble with psychedelics and understanding plant medicine and the neuroplastic effects of that. And I did an 8-gram mushroom ceremony right after I graduated medical school.
Is that considered like a hero dose?
It is a hero's dose.
Right,
yeah.
It's like flying to the moon and back.
You're just completely disintegrate.
Yeah.
You're nonverbal. You're not moving. You're just lying down. You just dissolve. And as I was going from this conscious state and then kind of disintegrating into nothing, I would say, it was the first time that I was really aware of all the tension and guarding that I was holding, all the armor in my body, whether that's jaw tension, gut tension, the upper neck and cervical region, and kind of like the tension.
Sure.
It was the first time that I realized I did not feel safe. Because people used to say, like, you know, they talk about safety and stuff like that, but it just felt so like, it's like, what do you mean? I'm safe. I don't feel like, kind of thing. It was the first time that I was able to kind of like actually experience how my body was adapting to a chronic environment where I did not feel safe.
And you've mentioned this before, I think, again, in social media or to me, but like you grew up as a gay kid, I think, feeling unsafe.
Exactly.
Right? So everyone has different reasons for feeling unsafe. But one thing I think you and I can relate on is, even though we probably grew up in a good, I guess, quote unquote, good like life or good areas, being someone who's not feeling comfortable in their own skin because they don't feel safe around people because of just who you are is very traumatic, you know? And so I think that's probably what you're talking about. It's like you've been holding this armor for 20 plus years
Yeah.
that you didn't even know you were holding because your body was just innately doing that to try to protect you, to keep you safe around your typical settings that you were kind of put in every single day.
Absolutely. And when I trace it back, it did really go back to those very early, childhood years, those very formidable years
Yeah.
where, I think the trauma that any gay or queer person kind of has to embrace is it safe to be my most authentic self? And I think you don't have to be queer to relate to this. Like how many people, whether, you're straight or gay,
Yeah.
have, monitored their voice, their movements, their body posturing when they're in certain rooms
Yes.
because it doesn't feel safe to be fully seen and expressed.
Correct.
And that could be because they might be humiliated, they might be rejected, they might be ostracized from the pack type of thing in the community that they so desperately want to be a part of. And so the body is always listening, and it is always witnessing these little micro adjustments that we are making in order to play safe and to stay safe.
Yes.
And so, very much like that was how my body was, adapting. It was a very adaptive response to survive. And so part of the healing journey is, yes, the awareness, but then the invitation that I really believe is the hardest work, but the most profound and liberating work is cultivating and creating the safety that we always sought as a child from within.
Yeah.
Less external,
Yep.
it's insourcing.
More internal. That's interesting. You brought up this story just about how we kind of carry ourselves and do things that we're conditioned to do as children. I remember just like last week, I was standing in line. I think I was at Air One, a grocery store, church, right? And I was sitting there, and my wrist kind of was like a little bit like flicked down, and I automatically was like, wait, I can't do that. My wrist has to be up, right? Because growing up, my dad used to get very, very mad at me if my wrist was ever cocked down because he thought that was like effeminate. So he would yell at me a lot if I ever had a down wrist. And so I'm just not like, as a 42-year-old standing in Los Angeles, my knee-jerk reaction is, oh, I see my wrist, I have to put it up because that means I'm in danger if my wrist is like kind of poised in a way that's like a little bit more effeminate. And thank God the work that I've done with you and my therapist, Elle, I was able to track this in real time. And then automatically I was like, fuck that. And I like put both my wrists down, just like for myself.
Claim
because
it.
I was like, who cares if my wrist is like down or at any angle? You could be the straightest human being in the world and have a limp wrist,
Right.
But the way my dad perceived that was, in a different type of a way, and a way that he felt like was going to probably affect me negatively growing up. So I think he tried to kind of like, kick that out of me, I guess.
I was curious, like, what was that relationship to your dad? And like, so you mentioned feminine. So I always look at things as neutral, not good or bad. But as a child, we always are trying to make sense of things. So we might put it in a good bucket, bad bucket. As a child, again, we don't have the tools to regulate. We are dependent on our parents, especially at a young age. And so there, oftentimes we will attune to them because we want their love. We want to make sure that it is unconditional, that they're not going to leave. But if there's anything that came up for you, like the story around that and that relationship to like, is feminine bad? Like, what did that actually mean to you as a child?
Well, I think I just was conditioned so many times to believe that if you show any effeminate things or a nature of being soft or emotional, that was going to probably result in me getting hurt by probably my dad, like whether it's physical that he would inflict pain on me or emotional, and then also just I think hurt by other people in my community, whether it was kids or other parents. I remember we'd all go play at one guy's house, and one day the mom opened the door and I was there to play with the other kids, and she just said, oh, I'm sorry, no one's here right now. And I like heard all the kids playing, but this woman had a really big issue with thinking that maybe I was gay, and she like shut the door on my face. And I remember thinking like, I don't remember thinking this at the time. I can think back and think, God, I didn't feel safe, like even around like other people's parents, because I felt like everyone was trying to like push me away from them because they felt like, I don't know, it felt like I had like the worst version of like cooties you could ever have because
Rejected.
and I have a straight twin brother,
Ah,
an identical straight twin brother. So like you have him who's like playing lacrosse and football and baseball, and I'm like, I want to like go grocery shopping. I want to like play hopscotch. I want to, do things that we weren't classified as masculine.
mm-hmm.
And I think where I grew up, that just seemed very off to a lot of people. And then when you have a parent like my dad who was kind of also making that feel the same way at home,
Mm-hmm.
like it spun into such a level of like fear, that I just constantly had around him. And to the point where even when my parents divorced, I was so excited that they were divorcing because I was like, oh, I don't have to be around this guy for more than one weekend every other weekend.
Your body knows.
Yeah. And so, yeah, anyway, it's a very complicated story around that with, our parents and things like that, how they can affect us. But,
Did you find yourself comparing yourself to your brother often growing up?
I get that question all the time, just being a twin. But I didn't because I think I was so consumed with trying to compare myself with everyone that it wasn't just my brother. It was like I was just so different than every other boy around, and I was much more similar to like the females in my life in terms of
Yeah.
things I wanted to do. Like I wanted to like have three-way phone calls with my girlfriends and gossip and talk about what I wish I could have talked about the boys, in terms of who we had crushes on, but I had to lie and say I liked girls and all the
Mm-hmm.
bullshit. But yeah, I think it wasn't as much as my brother comparing. It was, I think we also were we were like butting heads all the time because we were together 24/7, and as twins, you just kind of know each button to press to like just kind of get right in there.
Right.
That's as most siblings do, but as twins, it's, I think, even larger. Um, but yeah, I do think now looking back on that, I can see, wow, how we, how I was even more, I guess, classified as different than my brother because there was someone who, everyone else was comparing us. That's the big thing. Like, it wasn't as much as me. Every other person around us was comparing us because we were the twins,
Mm-hmm.
and this is well before like, you could have IVF and things like that. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not like there were like 5 sets of twins in school. Like we were the set of twins from like K grade, kindergarten to 12th grade kind of thing.
Isn't it so interesting that we often define different as something that's wrong or bad?
Well, that's the thing. Now that's my superpower,
Exactly.
right? Like being
That's
different.
how I've rewritten my relationship with ADHD too,
Yes,
right? It's
yes.
not brokenness. It
No.
is, and that heightened sensitivity is a superpower.
Yes, all day long.
And, but again, it's rewriting that relationship to that. But when we're young, we have our parents, our environment and society telling us who we should be.
Yeah.
And so we start to feel shame
Yes.
around these very real and authentic parts of ourselves. And part of the journey is, as we get older, is, unlearning the parts that we built out of survival and to adapt and to receive love and recognition and admiration from others.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the parts that are truly us and authentic to us? But that also takes a lot of courage because, again, there's a reason why we stuff these under the rug at such an
Yeah.
early age, because that sensitivity, those feminine natures, the part that made us and unique,
Mm-hmm.
right? There was a story we created that, again, this isn't welcome. This isn't safe. Like in terms of my physical safety could be in jeopardy if I was out and about and Ryan was just being his best extravagant self as a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah, I had a restraining order against a guy because there were so many like hateful death threats coming towards me in middle school and high school in our neighborhood, which again is psychotic to me. I'm like, how do my parents just allow that to happen? Like, oh, look, we should get a restraining order. Like, there should have been more done, I think, proactively in that community to like protect me or anyone else going through something like that. Which I just had a crazy feeling, which is that today is June 1st. No, second? Okay. Well, it's Pride Month. Okay.
It is.
I didn't even like think about that in terms of like our episode, but
Yeah.
it's, I think, beautiful that you're on the show and, we're able to talk about these type of things because my biggest thing about having this kind of show is not only to help people's physical health and their mental health, but to hopefully instill to people who might have a young Tyler or a young Ryan or a young anyone at home that's a little bit different than someone else, that again, celebrate their superpowers because their superpowers are ultimately going to be, or their differences are ultimately going to be what make them become superstars down the road, and I think the reason that I have such a successful, I guess, business in terms of design right now is because of those things I went through. Because just like you have a successful business with being this incredible, incredible intuitive doctor because of those things that you went through in the past, you know? So, but imagine if we could have had that encouragement from a young age, we would be probably even further along, you know, within our careers at this point, our journeys in life.
Totally. You know, I often say though, like, I wouldn't change anything. Like I had to go through what it is. I don't know if you
I do
relate
agree
to
with
that
that. I
too.
do agree with that. Yes.
And you know, there's something that Gaber Mate, he's an MD that is very profound and speaks a lot about the role of trauma and the nervous system and how that impacts our physical health and chronic ailments. And you know, there was something that he said. It was a little soundbite in a podcast one time, and I was just like, "Wow, this! I never thought of this before." But yes, the trauma of being queer and growing up in a straight man's world, a heteronormative world where it doesn't feel safe to be your authentic self is one trauma. But the other trauma is having to navigate that on your own when you didn't have the tools.
Yeah.
That
there's
is
no one guiding you, supporting you.
That is incredibly overwhelming to our nervous system. And so part of that too is, again, depending on when you come out and when it felt safe enough to come to terms and acceptance with who you are. Everyone's on a different journey with that. It's learning to slowly trust and open yourself up to other people too, when the world and that environment, having to figure out all that own, can really promote self-sufficiency and hyper-individualistic tendencies and kind of the achiever tendency and the guardedness of not actually feeling like you can open up, because there's this wound that we all had to carry at great lengths and kind of keep that a secret.
Yes.
And we couldn't ask for help. We had to kind of figure it out. And that also, you know, amassed great strength too.
Yeah.
I see so much strength in our community, but it also does require a lot of courage to fully step into your authentic self. And that's not always easy, because visibility, you know, also to our nervous system can feel not safe, because it opens us up to rejection, humiliation. And we're not meant to have, you know, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people constantly, you know, nitpicking on us and criticizing us. And so, you know, that visibility piece is a very real perceived threat to our nervous system.
Do you think that, like, growing up in this kind of way and having to constantly dodge things and escape things can really have a major impact on your nervous system as a general whole, as an adult?
Absolutely. So holding patterns is the way that I see it, the way that we adapt. And so these are all adaptive ways that we, adaptive survival strategies. So it could be tics, it could be posturing, it could be the way that our eyes blink when we talk about certain things. It could be, again, the IBS, the chronic tension and wherever we hold that. It could be the low back pain. It could be the anxiety. It could be whatever the label is.
Mast cell.
Mast cell usually comes later on, because it's kind of like, it's this buildup over time of compounding factors. Mast cell is never the root cause.
Yeah.
It is an expression of, again, all those compounding factors that have added up over time with a dysregulated nervous system that does not have the foundational capacity to regulate emotions. And a lot of that is because safety is compromised. And so really the first place to start is, yes, bringing awareness, but it's an invitation back into the body.
Yeah.
Not just thinking through things in our emotions. It's actually coming home to ourself and feeling those emotions that we stuffed away for so long, because we learned that our sensitivity was a problem and something that, you know, could cause physical harm to us, right? And so it's the willingness to, and curiosity to listen, and also you don't have to do this alone. I think a lot of times there is a responsibility that's like, you have to do the work, but you can absolutely lean on people, as I know you've done that too and built your support team too. But it's a process. It takes time, and it's not a quick fix.
No. Okay. Well, then good. This is where I really want us to dive in then to, I think, the whole mast activation cell, you know, syndrome. And really, I'd love for you to explain a bit more like what that is. And I think what you just touched on is so imperative, I think, for myself and anyone else who has MCAS, because it's not like this is something that just happened overnight. You know, this is something that had been happening for years upon years upon years. I remember I had a really insane experience happen, you know, maybe 10 years ago on a boat, where my nervous system kind of flipped on itself because I had taken too much ecstasy, actually. And I ended up having these convulsions for 8 hours on the top of a boat in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the night. And I was just staring at the stars saying, dear God, dear God, dear God, please don't let me die. Please don't let me die.
Mm.
As my whole body was like convulsing. And that was like the starting point, I think, of my nervous system really overreacting to everything. Like I could have too much caffeine, which by that I mean 2 cups. I could have 2 glasses of wine. That was too much for me. I could have a stressful situation with work, and I would then go into these convulsions, which is essentially like an awake seizure, right? For about 6 years, I dealt with that. And this was well before Mast Cell came into my life. But the reason I bring up that story is because I think I had the traumas from childhood that really never got dealt with. Then I had this major trauma on the boats from an essentially almost an overdosed experience. And then my body finally one day just said, enough is enough. You know, like we can't keep protecting you. Like we cannot keep doing this. Yes. And then Mast Cell kind of reared its head. Again, I gave the insight of all those stories just so people understand who might be dealing with MCAS or something related to that, there is always a backstory here, you know. But could you give us and, you know, the audience a bit more of a definition of what mast cell activation syndrome actually is?
Yeah, no, it's and I'll say this with mast cell too, and I'll describe it. We're still figuring out more and more what it is. It's kind of ambiguous. We don't have necessarily the most clear diagnostic criteria too. But mast cell activation syndrome basically is these hypersensitive mast cells. Mast cells are part of our immune system. They secrete and degranulate to release histamine. Histamine is a signaling molecule. It is a neurotransmitter. It's a communicating molecule, and it's lined all throughout our body, through our nose and our gut and our lungs and our skin and our eyes. They're all over the place.
Okay.
And most people might be familiar with histamine in terms of allergy-like symptoms.
Yes. Yeah.
They are exposed to some type of allergen. It could be, you know, peanuts and kind of going through that anaphylactic response, or seasonal allergies, pollen, something of that nature too, where histamine is appropriately released. It kicks up inflammation. It is helping to traffic immune cells. It's bringing more blood flow. So the kind of the highways open up so these immune cells can get to where they need to go. But it also comes with a bunch of different symptoms that are very uncomfortable. This could be skin related, so itching, rashes, eczema, flushing, things of that nature. Neurological, you might feel lightheaded. You might have brain fog, anxiety, especially when you're really, I call histamine, and you go on these little histamine episodes. There can be GI related things. We have tons of histamine receptors in our gut, and we have a specific enzyme called DAO that helps to break down histamine in our gut.
Yes.
And so oftentimes people might have bloating, or they'll have digestive issues, diarrhea when histamine is really high. And then there's respiratory things too. So like, you know, most people I think are familiar with that with like seasonal allergies.
Yes.
So all that to say, it's this collection of symptoms. And usually if people have seasonal allergies, or, you know, it's usually a transient thing. It's temporary. These histamine is released, and then the body clears, it goes back to normal.
Okay.
Now, people that have mast cell, that histamine response goes off, and it never kind of goes off, and it's kind of this roller coaster. It's a body that is hypersensitive, and the body is always secreting histamine to potential threats.
Okay.
Threat can look different for everybody. It could be infection. It could be, I often say, like this metaphysical state of like, what am I afraid of? Because, you know, inflammation, which is a part of our immune response, it's kind of summoning the immune troops to go and traffic to where they need to go, and histamine is a part of that. If we're constantly perceiving threat, or it sees anything in our environment, you know, cold plunge, sauna, exercise, these are all stresses on the body, but they're also good stresses. We call them hormetic stressors.
Yes.
So it's kind of the idea of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But when your body's in that super hypersensitive state, it will react to everything. It's just going to tag everything as threat.
I was laughing only because when I was in the worst state, I was doing so many saunas, so many cold plunges, working out like a fucking maniac, because I'm like, this has got to help. This is going to help me. And really, we now discovered, or you helped me discover, like that was making my symptoms so much worse, because I was kind of stacking on all these things to make my nervous system feel that much more out of control. But you see online and Instagram, like how cold plunges and all these things are so good for you, which they are at certain points. But when your body's already overreacting and you're doing way too much, it just overexerts it. So
and then there's genetic influences this too. So I know you did a genetic report too. We
Yeah.
looked at that too, and so that's where we can personalize this a little bit more too. And there can be genetic differences in terms of how we break down histamine.
Yes.
Oftentimes we see people with genetic mutations, polymorphisms in MTHFR, so
Yes.
issues with methylation, and these individuals.
Which didn't I have that as well, right?
You did,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I do find this pattern, like if you have the MTHFR gene mutation, like there is a need for specific methyl donors and B vitamins to help with that process.
Yeah.
For hormones, detoxification, energy, DNA repair. That's kind of what it does. But in people that are already hypersensitive, and MCAS can oftentimes be sensitive to B vitamins. And so for some people, we can't even start with B vitamins because they might feel more anxious, wired, agitated, and irritable. It's almost too stimulating, likely because of how it's influencing our neurotransmitters and things like epinephrine and serotonin. But yeah, we have a system that is hypersensitive. We have chronic allergy-like symptoms that don't resolve. And then these individuals often react to a lot of different things. So again, the sauna, the cold plunge, the HIIT exercise classes, fragrances, environmental toxins, mold, food, supplements. Like a lot of these individuals,
Check.
five safe foods. It's like I can do like
Yes.
boiled chicken with no seasoning. I can do frozen fish. I can do, rice. There's like very few safe foods.
Listen, let me tell you. I want to tell everyone also the worst, one of the worst things about this mast cell syndrome when I was really going through it was when I honestly just kind of discovered this, and I think we just maybe started working together, but basically you have to cut out every single food from your diet because every food has histamines in it. Every single food, anything that's been like refrigerated, or it feels like every single food. So the couple foods that I think you told me I was able to eat, or that I figured out I was able to eat, was millets, which is like a grain. So cucumbers, but you have to peel the cucumbers because you can't have the outside of the cucumber because that has histamine on it, and hard-boiled eggs, right? So I remember at an install in Beverly Hills, we're doing this major, huge project that we've been on for a long, long, long time. And I'm sitting there with my team, and every day we're having lunch and dinners because it's like 15-hour days. I have my rice cooker in this house. I'm eating millet and cucumbers. My team's looking at me like I'm crazy. I'm like a skeleton at this point. I've lost so much weight, and I'm trying to keep it all together. Everything is great. We're launching this huge home. We're showing it to our client. We had the big move that bus moment. And I remember the clients were so excited. Thank God it went well. They love the house. And they're like, we want to treat you guys to a beautiful dinner. Like, we're going to order in all this gorgeous sushi. And I'm like, oh, fuck me. Like, I can't eat any of this, but I didn't want to talk to them about, oh, by the way, I'm going through one of the hardest times of my life, health-wise, because I didn't want to show, I guess, them that I was going through something so difficult, meaning the client. But
Are you open to unpacking that a little bit?
I am, yes. And I think because I think that was a major problem, right? Was that I was keeping all this to myself, and I was living almost through the lens of like what Instagram looks like, like everything is shown on Instagram is so beautiful and so perfect, especially in my life as a designer. And I didn't want to let anyone in on the secret that like, I'm actually feeling like death most of the days. Like there's many days where I could not actually get out of bed because I had so much chronic pain throughout my entire body. And I'm trying to go to these doctors kind of secretly, but then post on Instagram that everything's great because my life is great. Like there were a lot of great moments happening, but I now know what a detriment that was to me because I really wasn't sharing with anyone, even my closest friends, what was going on, because I felt like I didn't want to share anything until I had answers, and I didn't want a lot of outside influence and noise about it and judgment potentially. But yes, I think that at the end of the day, I'm expressing this story really more for people who have dealt with MCAS or are dealing with it, or maybe one day might, and just understanding that like this is part of the process, I guess, is like figuring out how to calm down your histamine levels. And as much as it sucked to carry a rice cooker with me for like 6 months and all the weird shit that I had to do, it proved to be very beneficial because I was able to learn what was really going on within my body. And more than that, I was learning at the same time what was happening mentally, because a lot of this was brought on by mental scenarios, as you've told me, and you've now allowed me to learn so much through a lot of your practices.
And you've been doing the embodied work around that as well.
And trying, I'm kind of I give it 110% type of person or nothing. And I'd say to anyone who's dealing with a chronic illness like this, you have to just keep going one foot in front of the other every single day and being incredibly vigilant for yourself and thank God for ChatGPT, because that literally, it saved my life in a sense of like, it kept everything very organized for me, like with every single doctor, with everything that you said to do, with everything my therapist says to do. It just allows me to stay on track to like what my toolkit is and like what I
Mm-hmm.
can pull from when I'm having a flare up of a sense, you know. And the flare ups can be multiple different things, so I need to pull multiple different tools from that toolkit to kind of calm the flare down, you
And
know.
that, how beautiful, like think about how big your toolkit has gotten over the
It's
last
fucking
year to two
massive.
years, and like the empowerment around that
Yeah.
too. It's like, and my work, my goal has always been, even though there's been iterations of my work over the past decade, it has always been around um, body literacy, really
Mm-hmm.
coming back to ourself and really under you know, reconnecting with our body and understand what it's trying to communicate with us. Because at such a young age, I think one of the biggest fallacies we've been led to believe is like we can't trust our body.
Yeah.
And from a very young age, we learn to outsource our power, our knowledge to expert authority figures, and blind trust. And it's not that we
Yes.
can't, you know, rely on other people and get support, but I really believe like there's so much power, and when it comes to the healing journey, no one is going to advocate more for your health than you.
Mm-hmm.
And so there needs to be this self responsibility of taking a proactive role in your own healing too, while
Yeah.
also working with the providers that are not going to dismiss you, are willing to work with you, that are, you know, more open minded and looking at more of the esoteric and kind of like bridging, you know, the best of, you know, what we know of evidence based medicine and Western medicine and other modalities that are, again, going to be working supportively with the body's innate capacity to heal, which is very much Eastern based philosophy. And then the wisdom of our nervous system, because that
Sure.
is foundational for everything, because our nervous system is responsible for our digestion, our mood, our hormones, our sleep. If our body's going to be in this anabolic state where we're like building up versus
Mm-hmm.
broken down catabolism, where you start to lose a lot of weight, it is going to be responsible for sex, libido. Like it just, it's far reaching.
Yes.
And so again, the best way is working with it. And I think that's also where a lot of people are missing the mark. They're doing all of the functional medicine, supplement physical things to address this. And to your point, like if I'm working with somebody to start, and you know, we did this as well, it's like we need to stop the mast cell activation. We need to calm the mast cells, get
Mm-hmm.
them to stop degranulating and releasing so much histamine. You need to support histamine breakdown and clearance.
Yes.
And you can use targeted supplements. We can lower the histamine foods and do like a low histamine diet. Some people, they're more complex. They might need also low FODMAP diet too,
Mm-hmm.
so low fermentation because they have gut dysbiosis and parasites and stuff, which oftentimes can go hand in hand. But it needs to be done in a very specific way. We want to first make sure you're feeling better first and not
Yeah.
feeling so crappy and yucky. And let's use nutraceuticals. Let's use herbs, supplements, natural things.
Mm-hmm.
Let's use diet, but also if we need to, let's pull out medications as well. There's no shame in
Well,
that.
that's, I think I was going to say, like, we're not trying to shame medications, because I
Right.
also take Gastrocom, right,
Mm-hmm.
which is a medication to
Mm-hmm.
help lower my histamine levels. And that made a very big difference. But I think I was also nervous to even take a medication, because I thought, like, I don't know, in my head, I was like, I can do this on my own. I don't want to put something bad in my body that's maybe, you know, I guess not natural, I
I hear
guess.
that a lot, but
Yeah.
like it's, I'm curious, like where'd you learn that? Because it's all a learned
I,
behavior of like, okay, I don't want to put this in my body. It's bad for me, or it's poison. I often hear from people. People are so against doing drugs, and it's
yeah.
really understanding where they're at and their understanding of that.
I mean, Mom, I love you, and you're probably listening. But it was for my mom, because she was such a natural believer. Like, she was the one who got us into, like, we were doing acupuncture at like 10 years old. You know, like, she's just a natural kind of believer of like all that kind of naturopathic medicine, or and Eastern medicine. But she dealt with her own health struggles for many, many, many years. She had a thing called pemphigoid, which left her blind in one
Mm.
eye, and so but then ultimately, to get through the pemphigoid, when they finally figured out what it was that she had, she ended up having to do chemo, which ultimately cured or suppressed her pemphigoid, right?
Mm.
So I think now she probably look back and think, okay, you know, maybe I should have taken maybe a more medical approach. That being said, she went through the ringer with all the doctors, right? And got a lot of benefit out of more Eastern medicine as well. Um, but I think, yes, I was learned as a young child that like we can do this on our own. We can figure this out. Like, we don't have to take the medication route, which I think there is something healthy about that, because I don't want to just slap a band-aid on every single thing.
Absolutely.
But there's something unhealthy when you're now nervous to put medication in your body that could ultimately just help get you to that next stage, because then you can always come off the medication when things have kind of calmed down.
Use it as a bridge.
As a bridge,
right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a skilled provider, like a good functional medicine doctor,
Yeah.
is not afraid to prescribe medications as needed, if depending on how far the pathology is. Like, again, we don't want you suffering. We want to, let's improve the symptoms, and we'll pull out all the stops for that while we slowly work on the underlying root cause, because it's multifactorial. It takes time. You know, it's not a quick fix. So for some people, I would say for the MCAS journey, like minimum 6 months usually, if not longer. It depends on how long you've been dealing with it, how many layers there are, because, you know, you'll also have things like, sure, the nervous system piece, safety, constantly scanning for threat based on our lived experiences, you know, is baseline, right? And I think like rebuilding that safety within and that home within, and building the regulation, the safety to get to capacity so you can process the deeper trauma related stuff. But you know, then you'll have things like, you know, Lyme and co-infections, you'll have mold toxicity, you'll have other type of viral thing, I call them frenemies in a way, like they're all kind of come to play, but like a high viral load to Epstein-Barr virus, herpes viruses, stuff of that nature. And then there can be parasites, there can be small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and gut, you know, issues there, leaky gut. So you have to approach this in a very kind of like a systematic way. If you do it too much too soon, when you don't have the capacity and the foundations, you can actually make things worse.
Sure.
And so you need healthy and kind of flexible nervous system capacity in order to do deeper detox. And I think some people like push that because they're like, well, I have heavy metals and I have mold and I need to, you know, kind of push this, and like it can actually make things worse.
Yeah.
And so it's really slowing down, and it's doing some of these very simple, mundane things that I know I had you do too, where it's like morning sunlight, going on a walk, predictable anchors. Your nervous system, when it's in this fragile state and hypervigilant state, it is looking for cues of predictability, which tells our nervous system that it is safe. Familiarity equals safe. And you know, not rushing through things, right? If we're always rushing and stressed, that's going to just throw gasoline on the fire type of thing like that. And that can also be just simply when we get caught in, you know, little loops and stuff like that, orienting to our environment. We're safe, just looking at textures, colors, whatever it is.
You say it's like find 5 things or something, right?
Yeah.
Find 5 things that make you feel comfortable or safe, or 5 colors or something, right?
Right. Pattern interrupting. So sometimes, and this can be especially true for people that have had Lyme in the past and they have chronic Lyme, or they have a re-exposure to mold, or you know, a lot of people have multiple chemical sensitivity. So there's like a certain fragrance, and with that fragrance, it's almost like this reminder, this cue of whatever that environment was that made you not well and was not safe. And so it can just trigger this loop in our brain that like reminds us of that, and it can just change our stress physiology like that.
Can I talk to you about my trigger?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just saying this, I'm like, I have to tell this story. Okay, so I have a very, very sensitive thing with perfumes and colognes, and it's gotten a lot better, but at my worst, it was very, very bad. Like to the point where I couldn't even be on the same side of the street as someone who's wearing a heavy cologne. Like I'd have to walk across the street from them.
What would happen if you were around them?
Oh, I felt like I was dying. I felt like the inside of my body was like being lit on fire, and which is such a weird thing to say, because I'm like, how could that happen? But it really felt like someone's pouring gasoline like on the inside of my body, and then they lit a match, and then like everything was just like lighting up in my body. Like every sensory was just going through the roof. And I had this situation where I was going on a first date with a guy. We were taking a walk. He came to my home. We were going to walk down to the beach. And the minute I opened the door, I just got this huge whiff of cologne. I'm like, fuck. I'm like, oh my God, this poor guy. Like, he's no clue what he's in for. And I was like, all right, it's okay. We're going to have a date outside. We're going to take a walk. It's going to be beautiful. So I'm like going on this walk, and I literally, Tyler, I found myself like dodging like the wind. So like if the wind was blowing, I felt like to the left, I was like always on the right of him. If it was on the left, I was, you know, going on the other side. And I wasn't listening to anything really that he was saying on the whole date, because all I could think about was how I'm dying on the inside, and this cologne is going crazy, and what's wrong with me? I'm psycho, and I thought I'd healed a lot more, and how am I here today? Because this was like after we'd started working together, you know, and I'd come very, very far. We get to the coffee shop that we're supposed to sit to after we're having our walk. And I'm the whole time thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to be indoors with this guy. Like, this is just going to be too much for me. And so we're waiting in line to grab our coffees. And I just looked at him and I said, hey, I said, this has nothing to do with you. It's not a negative. I said, but I'm curious, what's the cologne that you're wearing? because I think I'm having kind of a sensitivity to it. Because at that mind, I was rationalizing, maybe if it's the brand of cologne, I can figure this out, you know? And he looks at me dead in my face and he said, I don't wear cologne. And I was like, okay, well, the jacket you're wearing must have cologne on it from like a couple days ago. And he's like, I just told you I don't wear cologne. And I'm still rationalizing. I'm like, okay, how else could I be smelling? This guy's like, oh, your hair products. You must have like hair product that has a lot of perfume in it. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
looking at me like, this guy's psycho, you know? And then I get down to, I'm like, okay, your deodorant, does that have it? And he's like, no, no, no. So this is when like a light bulb moment went off for me because I realized, wait a minute, if this guy's not wearing cologne, if not have any scent in his body, then where was the trauma in my life that I actually picked up that cologne was dangerous to me? And thank God, again, I met you, had been working with you. Thank God I met my therapist, Elle Michelle, been working with her. And I had an experience growing up where I was roofied by a group of kids, older kids. And one of them who gave me the roofie and sat me down as I'm drinking. And he says to me, hey, have you ever done the date rape drug? I'm like, what? Why would I do that? And he's like, oh, because it can get you really fucked up. I'm like, no, I would never do that. And I took another sip of my drink, not thinking that they were roofing me at the time. And then I don't remember anything from that point forward.
That's so scary.
It was terrifying. I don't know what happened, to be honest, that entire evening. And then I woke up in a random house and I got into my car and I ended up getting into a very bad car accident at 16 years old after this roofie incident. And so
That's
again, my mind was going back to, if you're in fear, meaning even if you're just fearful to go on a date with someone because you're a little anxious, you're a little nervous, are they going to like me? Am I going to like them? My brain was like, well, we'll help you. We'll help you get out of the situation by igniting something that was so fearful for you at the time, i.e. a cologne smell, even if the person's not wearing a scent. My brain was essentially tricking itself to say, like, you don't feel good right now to go on a walk because you're a little bit nervous or anxious. Let's give you something to get out of the situation, you know? And then from that day forward, once I realized that those connecting dots, the cologne thing has been almost non-existent for me. Like my team here, there's a bunch of Italians and Turkish guys who work on the crew. They love cologne and they smell beautiful. But a year ago, 6 months ago, I wouldn't be able to have been around them, you know, because it'd be too intense. So I guess all of that being said, do you see this happen often to people, like in terms of their brain, something that happened to them younger and then they're sensitive to a scent or something like that?
Yes. And first, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing that. And that for a 16-year-old is just so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And the vulnerability of being taken advantage of in that state and like what happened, you know, and it's such a scary experience. And so our nervous system remembers all these experiences, and it's likely that it tagged this, when this happened, this experience, that there was a smell associated with that, because smell, we actually, our olfactory nerves have a direct line to our limbic system in our brain, which is how we perceive threats. So our amygdala is always kind of scanning for threat type of thing like that. So that's the interesting thing too. And again, we have mast cells that line all of our kind of respiratory tract as well. So the proximity to that. So there's kind of like that memory. So again, it's likely, it's not like your nervous system was trying to, what it was doing, I would say, when you had that date, likely is it was scanning for what it knows is that when I've had these environments with men before, they've worn cologne and it was not safe. And so it's almost scanning to like reaffirm what has been your reality in the past in order to protect you.
Wow.
So going back to pattern interrupting and, you know, like how can these simple exercises be helpful when you're kind of in this loop of like, okay, like I'm not safe, something's wrong type of thing like that. It's like literally saying out loud, like, stop. Like, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it go. And then it's kind of maybe closing your eyes, taking a breath, opening your eyes, orienting to your environment. And by doing that, it allows you to anchor into the present moment, be engaged with the senses, what you're seeing through your eyes, smell, whatever. Maybe you even need to touch yourself too, if sometimes people will dissociate, depending on, you know, what their trauma was and how their body kind of adapted to that. And it's just coming back to that present moment where you're not in the future, you're not in the past, because again, what your nervous system is thinking, it's predicting, like, when I'm in this environment, this happened last time, so this is going to happen again. This could also be with, you had mold toxicity and you had severe brain fog and all these different issues, autoimmune flare. So now you are at an Airbnb and you see water damage and mold, and it's like the smallest little water damage thing. And you're like, it's going to kill me. It's going to take me down.
Yeah.
And
And
so
it reignites all of that.
all of it, because the limbic system, it's almost like it's the dial is turned up, and that's where brain retraining comes in.
Yes.
And limbic retraining is to turn down the dial on that, because if the body is constantly seeking and searching for threat in overdrive, it is looking to confirm that the environment that you're in is not safe.
Yes.
And so when you're constantly in an environment where it does not feel safe, like your external environment is not safe, everything's out to get you the food, everything is toxic, things of that nature, that is how your body is ultimately responding. And so histamine is literally responding to that constant perception of threat.
Yes.
Because histamine will also degranulate in response to infections and in response to allergies and stuff like that. And it's inflammation, it's immune mediated. But again, that's that bridge there.
Yes.
with
So
that
how
is.
do people retrain their limbic brain? Like,
Well-
what is the best? I know you've given me some really wonderful exercises, I guess,
Right.
but what if someone came to you and they hear this podcast and they feel like maybe there's some kind of connection here, like from a past trauma, connecting them to something else in their life at the present day? What would be your, I guess, kind of advice to retrain the limbic brain?
Well, first it starts with awareness, right? It's being aware of the looping, of the intrusive thoughts, of the symptom obsession, because usually it's like certain symptoms that will come on. And, some people with the complex chronic illness, like, they got it bad. And unfortunately, like, whether it's, the Lyme and co-infections, it's long COVID, like long haulers. It could be, again, the mold. It can be people have what's called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, so POTS and dysautonomia.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different layers to this, and it can be very scary, and people end up in the hospital. And so, like, I get that. And it can be hard to retrain your brain that it's like, okay, if I start to feel this again, we start to think, oh no, it's kind of like this spiral, like we're going back here, we're going back, we're taking steps backwards, we're getting sick again. And so the first thing is awareness. It's being aware of the ruminating thoughts and the symptom obsession, stopping, being
Yes.
like, okay, like we know where this is going. It's reorienting to your room, right? It's looking around you, acknowledging I'm safe, little affirmations, maybe putting a hand on a heart, taking a couple breaths, right? We have, our breath is our direct line to our autonomic nervous system. And our autonomic nervous system is kind of like something that we can't really control. That's why it's called autonomic. We can't actually control it in a way and manipulate it through our breath.
Okay.
And so our nervous system is constantly in this very dynamic way, toggling between different nervous system states. And we can be in more of this, what we call ventral vagal state, where we're open, we're engaged, we're curious, we're playful, we're curious, right? And that's, I think, a state that a lot of us like to be in.
Yeah.
We can also be in a sympathetic state where we're mobilized, we're activated, we're angry, we're kind of in this fight or flight, we're like running or fighting from a bear. We can have that little bit of like anxious energy, kind of like wired. And so in that kind of state, like oftentimes we want to actually like move that energy as opposed to suppressing it. And then we also have more of this freeze. It's kind of like a mixed state where you're kind of like wired but tired. It's kind of like having like the foot on the gas pedal and the brake at the same time.
Yeah.
And some people can be hanging there.
Yeah.
And
I
then
think I was there all last week.
You were there all last week.
Yes.
And there's different symptoms that
Yes,
kind of come
yes.
with this too. And that freeze, you might feel dissociated, might feel a little numb, brain foggy, things of that nature. And then we can have kind of go down this ladder into dorsal vagal, which is kind of this shutdown preservation response. And so this is a very adaptive survival-based strategy when things feel overwhelming, that our body tries to preserve energy. And there's very real changes that are happening on a cellular level.
Yes.
From a biochemical perspective too, in terms of what's happening. But with this is often where we feel numb, disconnected, shut down. We don't want to get out of bed, or we kind of withdraw for society. We just want to kind of preserve our energy. We don't have a lot of energy. And so our body can toggle between these two. It's a dance. And so when I talk about nervous system regulation and building capacity, it's the ability to dance in between these different states and not getting stuck in one of these areas. And there's different tools that can be used depending on where you're at. But first, I think it's just bringing awareness of like, what state am I in? What am I feeling? And a lot of people that have experienced trauma, the thing that's challenging, have a hard time actually accessing how they actually feel.
Yeah.
Because when that experience happened, it was so overwhelming and beyond their capacity that most people kind of retreat. They go out of their body to not feel
Yeah.
whatever that was that they experienced. It could be, very horrific traumas, abuse, physical abuse, sexual assault, all these kind of things of that nature. And so this is where I mentioned, like, the healing journey is slowly and over time regulating and building that safety intrinsically within the body, so that you can come down from the mind and always kind of over analytical and always kind of ruminating thoughts and always up here, to actually be in the body, and it actually feels safe to feel those emotions.
Yes.
And that is a lifelong journey, to be honest.
And that's what I was saying about, like, even last week, like, I had to take an antibiotic because I had a foot infection, random, whatever, had this cut on my foot, got a bacterial infection. I had to take an antibiotic, which sent me into this place of, oh no, if I take the antibiotic, my gut's going to get screwed up. My gut microbiome is going to be all out of whack.
All this work.
All this, yeah, I know, exactly. I've done all this work with Dr. Tyler to get my gut all healed. And I was like, but I need the antibiotic because I have an infection. So this is actually when it's a good time to take a medication, right? And so I found myself multiple restless nights doing exactly what you just said, going through all of those different levels. But because I've had the training and the time with you over the last year, I was able to walk myself through it without actually having to call you, which was amazing, to say, like, it's okay if you're in this state right now. You won't be in this state in 10 more minutes. You won't be in that state in another day. You'll be in another crazy state, but that's all right, because it's part of the process and healing of what you're going through from past kind of experiences.
Absolutely.
And again, I think that's such a big thing for people to recognize with any of the things they're going through, is that a flare up or a step back doesn't mean you're stepping in the wrong direction or it's like a failure,
right.
Like, because I think a lot of people, again, I have perfectionism issues as well from years of all of this stuff. And I want it to be perfect. Like, once you start to feel good, you're like, it has to be this way forever. That's uncomfortably, that's not the way it is. Like, I wish that was, like, I wish I could tell myself I was going to feel great every single day the rest of my life. But the reality is that's not true. And the more you actually start to recognize that and say that it's okay to have bad days. I always used to think if I have a bad day, that means I'm dying or something. Like, if I'm off one day or off 2 days or I don't sleep one night, that something must be terribly wrong with me, But then I realized, oh wait, I'm a human being. I don't have to be perfect at all times. I don't have to feel rested at all times. And that doesn't mean I'm sliding back into where I was a year ago before I met you and I was losing rapid weight and having all these things happen. It's just part of the journey, which is what they say, right? The healing process. And
it's not linear.
It's not linear. It sounds, like, I know people say this all the time and it's a little cliche to say, but I think you're such a master at, like, helping people understand the journey and understand the process of what healing actually is on so many different components, which is what's been such a blessing to get to know you, And then again, we touched base on this, but I think it's very important for us to know that you are amazing at being a naturopath doctor. There are great MDs out there too, which I also still see. And then there's other modalities. I think it's about you finding what that secret sauce is for yourself,
right.
And understanding that everyone is different, but it's on you really as your individual self to find the tools that really work for you and pull from that toolkit on a daily basis. And if you don't work on it daily, it's like going to the gym. I say this to my friends all the time who have mental health issues. I'm like, guys, because they're, God, you're doing so well. You work so hard. I'm like, but it's like the gym. Like, if we all went to the gym once a week, you wouldn't have the chest that you want, or you wouldn't lose the weight that you want. If you do the same thing with your brain, if you only meditate once a week or do limbic retraining or any of these things that you've talked about today once a week, chances are it's not going to get that much better for you, but you have to be very, very, very consistent. It is a job. It's a job to stay healthy. It's a job that we should all take very seriously because we should all want to live as long as we can in the most healthy body and mind. So again, I don't know what to say other than, like, I just think you're incredible, for kind of like walking me through all this. And I just find you to be so inspirational. The fact that you've taken this journey and been so selfless, because you came from something that obviously you needed to find your own healing. But now the fact that you are on calls with me multiple times a month, you're on calls with, I'm sure you have hundreds of patients, right? Thousands of patients. And the fact that you give your energy to all of us is like, I was thinking about it as I was showering today. I was like, one, that sounds fucking exhausting. And
You gotta have
two,
good, yeah, boundaries.
yes, but two, I was like, what a fucking genius this guy is. Like the fact that you can manage that, you know, because I don't think I could manage that. I mean, I help my friends a lot with what I've learned. And that in itself sometimes seems like another full-time job, you know. And I also realize the blessings that I've had to have the financial resources to see someone like you, to see these other practitioners, and just even like the resources of community and connections, you know.
Yeah.
So I hope that everyone who could even have a moment of watching this or listening to this understands that there, even if you don't have the resources, there's things like this where you can, the amount of information you spilled today was so amazing, you know. And I think that that's the good thing about YouTube and ChatGPT and stuff like that. We still need our doctors, we still need our professionals, but you can now take a lot of this knowledge that you've given us and put it into chat or one or the other, you know, AIs, and it will help walk you through a lot of this in a way. But obviously, if you can get into a doctor and someone like yourself, it's 10 times better, you know, to do that.
Yeah,
But
we're not meant to do it alone. I mean,
no,
I will mention, you know, I do have a mast cell activation guide and a
yes, I
histamine
wanted to
guide,
ask
which
about that. Yeah.
you can link if people are interested.
Okay, cool.
It's $10, but
Uh-huh.
it's literally everything kind of written out, so it'll give you the skeletal of kind of what to work with. But like that can just help bring more awareness on the things that you can start to
Oh,
do,
it's
and just I
great.
think give you a place to start.
Yes.
For people who are like, okay, like where do I start? This is overwhelming. I've tried so many different things. You know, with the brain retraining, like you talked about like working out, like again, it's just like you're training your brain. Like when you work out, you have to do it consistently, and it's that predictability and the reps over time that
Yes.
really are going to change, make a big change overall. And there's different systems, and so like I mentioned kind of like orienting, breath, safety, but
Yeah.
there are specific systems out there. There's three that I often refer to, and usually I tell people like shop around, read the reviews, read about it, and like which one ever resonates with you. There's and I have no in no order kind of thing like that.
Yeah.
But DNRS, Dynamic Neural Retraining System, is one.
Yep.
There's Primal Trust, which takes more of a primal somatic approach to brain retraining. And then there's also the Gupta program.
Yes.
And so I reference all of those in my guide, but those are helpful later on down the line. And usually it is the missing piece in a lot of people that have done all the functional dietary things of that nature. But ultimately, you know, I just want to acknowledge you too, and just like how far that you've come, and like I think how liberating, how freeing it is to, you know, have these tools and like be able to navigate this on your own. And that's what I want for anyone. Like as a
Yeah.
doctor, I see myself as an educator and a teacher, and to kind of instill those tools in people for people that want to learn.
Yes.
And it's not easy, but you know, chronic illness can be our greatest teacher, right? Everything is a reframe away. And even something that you said earlier, like when we have a little flare, little things come up, we can look at it as like something's wrong, something's bad, I'm going to die. Like something
Yes.
like versus my body's intelligent, it's adaptive, and these little flares, these little hiccups is actually part of my body's intelligent way of trying to protect me
Yes.
or actually heal
me. That's what I was gonna say. You taught me that my body wasn't actually attacking itself. My body was actually trying to teach me how to heal itself.
Right.
By these little cues and these little things that were happening. But that reframe that you just said is so imperative to people going through something like this, because it's a matter of just one sentence in your brain that can really shift things. Perspective in such a major way.
And that's huge, especially
Yeah.
when you're really in the trenches of it too. And
Yeah.
it's also not to dismiss, because a lot of people also with mast cell also overlap with different autoimmune conditions. And so
Sure.
depending on where you're at and how severe that is, you will need higher level intervention. Some people need to be on biologics, and they need to suppress their immune system because the inflammation noise is so loud.
Yes.
But if you have the means and you have the curiosity and willingness to do the deeper work, and you really believe that there's something else here, that you're not just defined by these symptoms, and that you're gonna have to be on these medications for the rest of your life, like work with somebody that is more integrative and holistic and is going to advocate for you and champion with you and be patient with you.
Sure.
And that's the other thing that's challenging too, but like with MCAS, there's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know, you have reflux and it's just an algorithm. It's like you try this medication, if it doesn't work, you can try this one, you can titrate these doses. Like there's so much creativity and artistry in the MCAS picture, because while there is oftentimes the nervous system piece underlying, some people have gut issues, some people have Lyme, some people have mold, some people an overburdened liver. There could actually be, intestinal damage too in terms of the gut stuff with celiac. There can be a heavy metal picture. There's just a lot of different things. And so you have to kind of really understand their background. But I would say the nervous system work is foundational. It is a prerequisite. Everyone can start by really just trying to quiet the noise, bring more awareness. What is my body trying to communicate with me? And I think underlying all of this is kind of this through line. Is it safe?
Mm-hmm.
Not only like my environment, like am I safe, but is it safe to be my most authentic self?
Makes sense. Okay, before I let you go, I just want to ask you a question about peptides. Because obviously,
love peptides.
If you're living under a rock and you don't know what peptides are, just jump onto Instagram and type in peptides. Or say the word peptides to your phone and 50,000 things will come up the next time you open Instagram. But is there, again, for the things that we've been talking about today, because obviously there's peptides for everything, but the kind of neurological side of things, the mast cell activation, is there peptides that you believe, and even gut peptides, that are kind of where you should start if you're integrating peptides? Obviously with a professional doctor guiding you, but is there something that you would suggest?
Yeah, and I will say with the peptides, again, this is where it's more experimental because we don't have like evidence-based practices for peptides for mast cell and histamine issues. So you're getting really creative on how you can support different biological processes, different organ systems, and more of that support way of, again, working with the body. A lot of peptides, working with the body, as opposed to a medication like a anti-anxiety medication or like an anti-blood pressure medication. It's like it's working against and kind of suppressing a specific pathway.
Got it.
To control symptoms.
Okay.
Peptides, our body makes them. They're these short little fragments. They're signaling molecules, and we make thousands of peptides in the body. And each peptide serves a very specific function. And we can supplement with them exogenously, either orally some or injectable or in nasal sprays as well, depending on what additional support we want. So with histamine, oftentimes there is a big cut component with all of this too. Some people, they also have immune dysfunction. And so depending on if their immune system is more underactive versus overactive, you could bring in something like a TB 500, which is thymosin. There's thymosin alpha too, which are kind of immune modulating. There's KPV that can be really helpful, and BPC 157. And lorazepatide. These are all gut-based peptides. So if there's leaky gut, a lot of inflammation in the gut, these can be helpful. And I might often use it with immunoglobulins. And those help to kind of mop up toxemia in the gut and kind of help with the tight junctions in the gut. So making sure that they are nice and glued together as opposed to permeable, which we don't want, because that's our gut and our immune system are very intimately connected. They often say that 70% of our immune system lies in our gut, the gout-associated lymphoid tissue. And so, we can play with the gut in that regard, and those can usually be oral. Now, there are some individuals, especially the people that have a really high chronic inflammatory bucket, the Lyme people, the autoimmune, that have the mast cell too. Some people I have found can really benefit from microdosing the GLP-1s like tirzepatide, because it's immune modulating.
Is that Retta? What would you call it?
No, it's different.
Okay, because there's Retruitide or something, right?
Right.
And then it was just called Retta, and then the one you're saying is what? Sorry.
Tirzepatide is like a lot of people know it as like Mounjaro, which is the GLP-1s for weight loss. And so that is a gut-based peptide GLP-1 made in the gut, and is involved in kind of satiation, influences our metabolic health, inflammation, things of that nature. But taking it below what is the standard dose of what it's typically prescribed at. So microdosing. This is very kind of experimental. Can really help some people that are dealing with just like lots of inflammation that's leading to the brain fog and chronic pain and kind of feeling puffy and all that. Drop it within days, like very, very quick. I personally don't do that, but I know other providers that are doing that with great success, and have worked with people that are doing those protocols, and they're like, this is magic. And so it's like, okay, like there's something to this. And so again, these can be fantastic tools to help move the needle, get you out of that state where your body is just feeling inflamed and, just in a lot of physical discomfort
Sure.
while you work through some of those other root cause factors. But again, having a consistent and steady provider that can kind of walk that through you and be creative
Yes.
is really, I believe, imperative.
Huge.
In the MCAS process, because it's not, I mean, when you went and saw your doctor, and I know you said like you got fired from primary care,
yeah.
it's like there was probably only so many tools they gave you, and then it's like that's all we can do.
And look, I say that lightly, jokingly, but he really, I think he exhausted all the typical practices that you would do with a patient when you were experiencing the things I was experiencing. He sent me to a lot of the right people in the right places, but I kept coming back very healthy, but still exhibiting symptoms. It's not like I was making these things up. But I think when he told me, look, I think it's best if we part ways, because I think he was just kind of exhausted with me, and he was a private doctor that I was paying as like a concierge doctor. Yeah. So he had the right, I guess, to do that, as I had the right to pay him to be my private doctor, but it all led me to you. So that's all that matters. That's the blessing. Okay. Before we go, I want you to tell people, where do they find you? Obviously we'll link your Instagrams and things like that, but you have a website? And
I have a website. Everything is drtylerjean.com.
Okay.
drtylerjean. I just started a Substack, so I want to write a lot more about this too, and kind of like the connection between nervous system and safety and authenticity and self-trust and, obviously the nervous system and chronic disease, and also like these very kind of just like bridging that intersection of all these things and how that ultimately impacts your health, and what is like I think I've been just in the inquiry of like, what is health? Because before I used to think it was, or we were told it's just the absence of a diagnosable disease. But, health is a state of vibrancy and vitality. You feel a healthy, vital person. And so again, like to that point, you could be like that person of like, you feel dead inside and like you have perfect labs and you're the emblem of health, and it's like, I don't feel healthy, right? And so I've just been in this inquiry of like, what is health, and what I think we can also get too obsessed with the healing process. And I think something that is a little meta, it's like, okay, you go through this whole journey, you get better, and then the feeling that we need to hold on to all of these healing tools and like be very regimented with them, otherwise I'm going to regress. But that journey of continuous healing is learning to graduate from the training wheels to get back on the bike, and needing less of those tools, to be less afraid of the food, to maybe not need the digestive enzymes for support. Because when you create more internal coherence and regulation and homeostasis, right, and you really build those foundations, and you create such a warm, exciting home inside of you, like, you're able to go out in the real world and experience life. And that's really what life is about. It's the people, it's the experiences. It's not to be, stuck to the supplements and to the limited dietary interventions. It's eventually we're going to graduate from that. We're going to expand our palate because we created the capacity for it by doing the deep inner work. And that's kind of, I think, that graduation. And of course it can be scary to graduate and eat some of these things up before maybe, that your body didn't agree with, but that's also a good testament to see like how much work have we done, and have we truly embodied and integrated that. And so healing is a very embodied practice.
Well, again, I can't thank you enough for coming all this way to sit with me and to educate me again, but also the audience, most importantly. And I just find you to be so fascinating, and I just really, 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 really hope that we continue this great relationship, and I hope we can have you on again. Yeah. I might start some peptides.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, I might start peptides here in the near future. So like, I'm sure there'll be a lot of things that we can continue discussing, and I'm hoping that anyone who listens to this writes in and has questions for you and stuff like that. But again, I'm excited about the journey that you're taking, and we're blessed to have, practitioners like you to help people through physical and mental health issues. So thank you for just being you and doing everything that you do. And I am excited for this to launch. So everyone, look up Dr. Tyler. He's fantastic. And we'll come back to you at some other point.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks.
Pleasure speaking.
Bye.